It's been a big week for Prince Harry. The boy's holiday in Las Vegas became a national debate about privacy after pictures of him naked during a game of strip billiards were published first on the internet and then in the Sun newspaper. But it doesn't seem to have seriously affected his standing with the public, and he is, after all, following a long line of so-called spares to the heir, the younger siblings are the next in line, or in this case, the second in line. Well, with me now, the royal commentator and historian Kate Williams. I suppose that's a slightly safer position to be in, isn't it? The other child, as it were.
The other child, it is safer, but it's also rather difficult, because what do you do when you're heir to the throne? You are going to be king. There's that big role sitting out there in front of you. If you're not, how do you fill your time? And the thing is about princes, you know, they have it all through history. They've had incredible power, status, influence, opportunity, particularly influence over the opposite sex. And, you know, Harry's antics in Vegas, well, they've been keeping us all gripped across the world. But to his ancestors, they've been nothing. You know, a bit of drinking and wandering around a hotel suite with no clothes on. Well, that was the equivalent of the crochet club for his 18th century ancestors. I mean, that lot, the future George IV, he and his siblings managed to amass between them 56 illegitimate children. Others of them had secret marriages. So at least, you know, Harry didn't run off and have a secret marriage in Vegas like Britney Spears. I mean, you know, we can have a lot worse.
Britney Spears, let's not get that far just yet, but that's what our society's been about for the last 2,000 years, hasn't it? Trying to rein in the antics of the rich and privileged members of our society.
Well, exactly. These royals, throughout history, they've been young, they've had huge amounts of money, huge amounts of women, they've been blackmailed by women when they were in their early teenage years. And, you know, this is something I think Harry hasn't quite understood, perhaps, till he goes to America, because when he's in Britain, his small group of friends, it's a very close coterie, they keep things quiet. They don't really talk about it. And now, you know, you go to America and he has to realise that he's a massive celebrity. Pictures of him cost a fortune.
Suggests he's not very worldly or not being schooled very well by those that do know.
I think he's very trusting, and I think because he's been able to trust his friends up until the age of 28, doesn't understand that in America, you know, things are different. Of course, when he was in Vegas, he met some young lads from Essex, and these chaps refused to sell their story about what they did with Prince Harry. They said, no, we're not going to. We love him too much. But when you get out into the real world, the big international world, you don't have to. No one else has to love the royal family, and people will sell the pictures because it can earn them masses of money. And it looks like the women have sold their story for huge sums. You know, they're going to be able to go and buy houses with this.
Well, good for them. I hope they're comfortable in those houses they buy. As far as the monarchy is concerned, there's always been an element of management of this, and there have been individuals within the monarchy who've been very, very dedicated to the notion of duty, and that nothing matters but the duty of the royal family. I mean, Queen Elizabeth herself is one of those, but there have been others. And then perhaps the other fine example is Edward VIII, or would have been Edward VIII, or was Edward VIII, and abdicated because he couldn't take on the job.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right, Andrew. I mean, you know, he was a naughty Prince of Wales, if we ever had one. Became king, abdicated for his mistress, and his younger brother, the Queen's father, George VI, took to the throne, and he was really much more staid. He wasn't
a Vegas character at all,
No Vegas for him.
Right.
No, much more staid. You know, very, very dependent on his wife, the Queen Mother, and he was really reliable, rather much more dull. And the Queen herself, the example of Edward VIII is very important to her. This man who gave up his throne just for a mistress, just to marry Wallis Simpson, that really stays in her mind. It happened when she was 10, thrust her into the role of heir. Before that, she would never expected to rule. And so she is absolutely obsessed with duty. The Queen is obsessed with duty. That's why she'll never abdicate. People say, oh, she might abdicate. She will be there till her dying breath. And so, you know, it's quite strange to her, I think, to see Prince Harry and to a lesser extent some of the other royals, you know, not when she was his age. She was on the throne, a mother, dealing with Winston Churchill.
Well, you know, the Queen is an extraordinary individual example of that. But she's got her sister, Princess Margaret, who was not of the same cloth at all. And also there was a feeling that Charles, in a way, was, as a younger man, slightly crushed by that responsibility, that almost it weighed heavily on him. And his younger brother, Andrew, was cut from a different cloth.
Yes, I mean, we've had all sorts of gossip about Andrew. And Charles, you're absolutely right. When Charles was younger, he said, I'm going to get married by 30. And then he didn't. And for many, he was, to an extent, a playboy prince. And of course, his marriage to Diana was a complete disaster, because he was already, he already had relationships going on at the same time. So it's I think it's pretty difficult to be a royal son. The eyes of the world upon you, huge amounts of temptation, and very few royals throughout history have managed to withstand that temptation. And in fact, the women are often better than the men, like Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth I, Queen Elizabeth II. You know, Queen Elizabeth II was in love with Philip when she was 13, and that was it. She never looked at another man. No Vegas for her.
She was lucky in that respect, I think, that all worked out. Now, so the Queen's grandmother, Princess May, is that right? Who married
who married George V.
She was a stickler for this whole thing as well.
Queen Mary, wife of George V, was a stickler for good behaviour, a stickler for manners, and she absolutely kept up the dignity of the royal family because her family had been a bit wild.
So what about a comparison then? Prince Andrew, who had his wild times.
Well, they called him Randy Andy,
They
didn't
did indeed. You know, he
did.
sprayed photographers with paint. He was always getting into trouble and so on. That was before mobile phones and the internet age and so on. But one gets the feeling that while Harry's sort of dancing in that same kind of area, he's got a lot more public support than Andrew enjoyed.
Well, that's the interesting thing. I think that's a lot of people across the world are quite interested in, especially in America, that Harry has, you know, been caught red-handed, drinking and dancing and playing strip billiards in Vegas, and he's getting huge amounts of support. A lot of complaints have gone through. Over 850 complaints to The Sun for printing those pictures. People are saying he's just a young lad, let him alone. But, you know, what I think is that if these were just these two photos, it could be containable, it could be forgotten. The royal family would say to Harry, no more Vegas, it's time, you know, to go to a crochet club, you know, Balmoral from now on, no more girls, you've got to settle down. And they'd be pushing him kind of to meet a girl, to get married around the age of 30.
That doesn't work, pushing a young prince to get married.
Well, you know, this is the thing. I think they're also probably hoping for a baby announcement for William and Kate to overwash this. But I think if there are bigger, if there's more story, if there are videos, if there's more kiss and tell, if it seems like what we've seen so far is just the tip of the iceberg, it's going to be a bit of a royal firefighting job. And we've already heard that Harry isn't going to be at the closing ceremony for the Paralympics on September the 9th. Whether or not he's going to be at the opening ceremony next week, we don't yet know.
Wow.
But his role may be a little less than we had expected it to be.
These things speak volumes. Kate Williams, thanks very much
indeed for coming in.
Thank you so much, Andrew.